This is the state of the nation. Irifa Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Sally. Welcome to the State of the Nation. My name is Henry Sally. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Again, welcome to the State of the Nation. My name is Henry Sally, and I'm delighted to be here today. It is the Independence Day long weekend for Ugandans. It is also the Thanksgiving weekend for Canadians. So for all the Canadians watching us, happy Thanksgiving. For the people who live in Toronto and the neighboring cities, I have a message for you. Your city has become a center of interest to the NRM government. And I acknowledge that we have been indoors for so long. Tubadde mu mayumba for so long right now because of COVID. And because batutaddemuko, many of you are excited about the events that are happening around the city. Tegeza, you are going to go all out. Naye nyenda kubasaba mwegendereze yonna gye mutambula. Your city, like I'm saying, don't quote me. City has become a center of interest to the dictatorship. This weekend, there are several high-profile agents, and there's a lot of money being thrown around. So you're not sure about Tambude, making sure we're going to invent you now, holiday. If you're buying liquor or something like that, making sure when your beer go more small leader. Other liquors, I would ask you to limit it to having it at your homes. But just be careful. Be very careful. Kansubire mu holiday mbangaliza Thanksgiving ennungi ababadde mu kukyakala jjo ne ku Friday bamba mufunye obudde mugendeko omusawo wammwe mukole blood work, making sure that you are safe. You are cool to go. But this weekend, we are going to discuss Indigenous Ugandans' fate, specifically those ones who are carrying foreign passports and not Ugandan passports per se. We are going to be discussing the fate of those Ugandans. We are going to discuss the dual citizenship law, the recent changes within the immigration, not the act per se, but the implementation of that act as it pertains to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I hope you are as excited to engage in this conversation as I am. I am very excited to engage in this conversation. I have two panelists in the studio today. Both of them are known, at least to North America. One is known because he has been participating on this platform for a while now. The other one is known because he is the former deputy speaker for UNA and a community leader within the Maryland area. So I am going to invite them to introduce themselves, starting with the former deputy speaker, Mr. Albert Bakasara. You're welcome once again to the State of the Nation dialogue, and I hope you're excited to be here. It's been a while since we last saw each other. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Henry. Thank you so much. Of course, I'm excited to be here. And I'm glad to join my panelist, Julius. Good, nice meeting you. Well, my name is, as you said, is Albert Bakasara. I'm, yes, the former Deputy Speaker of UNA, but even before UNA, I've been an activist and a leader in my community for a while now. I'm a married man. I work for the federal government, and I live right outside Washington, D.C., in the suburbs of D.C. I work for the federal government, although I'm not here as a representative of the Biden administration or in any capacity in that area. But I think the subject that we're going to discuss today is one of interest to our including myself. So that is why I gladly accepted to be on the show today. And thank you so much for keeping these conversations going amongst ourselves and enlightening and empowering our community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Albert Bakasara. The next is going to be my colleague and my friend as well. So, Mr. Julius Mitala Muswangali Muzukulu wa Muswangali, Mitala Julius. Before I know you are going to introduce yourself, but okusokera ddala njagala okutuusa okusaasira kwange gy'oli. I know you lost a sister who lives here in Canada, specifically Abbotsford. Kitalo nnyo okubeera nti wafiiriddwako omwannyoko oyo. Era tusuuse okusaasira kwaffe gy'oli as people of Canada, people of Toronto, people of Abbotsford, Vancouver. Kitalo nnyo. What's going on? How do you want us to help? But first, introduce yourself.
Yes, Henry. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody who's following and watching us today. Julius Mitala is my name. Muzukulu wa Mswangali. Mitala Muzukulu wa Mswangali is my screen name. I've said it and I've emphasized it here on many occasions that I use that name purposely in recognition of my grandfather, the man who made me who I am. So I'm always grateful to all his assistants that enabled me to become the man who I am. I am a regular here with Henry. We always meet here on Sunday to join new colleagues and friends, or wherever you want to be, to make sure that we have a healthy discussion about a number of issues pertaining, to our different circumstances, whatever we do, wherever we live, whatever we do. There are so many things that concern us as people in the diaspora, how we live and how we interact, with each other, and how we are able to, how we could possibly be able to influence, policy and government back in our home country, which is something that's very critical. My background is legal. I'm legally trained. People do always tend to say to me that, you are a mental health lawyer. What else do you know? I think that's a question I'll need to attack on a different occasion. But obviously, I'm knowledgeable across all areas. Mental health happens to be my special interest. Just as you find that somebody does constitutional law or international law or employment law, when you go through legal training, you choose a specific domain where you want to become an expert. And for me, mental health, because of what it is, it affects lots of people, at so many different levels. People sometimes don't even know that they are suffering from mental health. But in order for you to make sure that your rights are protected, when you get to interface with the different restrictions that apply, that setting when you become, detained under the mental health legislation in whichever country, whether in the Western world or whether in Africa or wherever it happens to be, it's a crucial conversation that needs to be had, and I think it requires people who have a degree of expertise in that area to be able to deal with all sorts of challenges. So that's my area of interest, and what more could I say? I'm looking forward for the exchange. I wish to appreciate Henry for all the time and effort that you've spent with me over the last difficult days. Obviously, I lost a sister. She was a very dear sister to me. We grew up together. She came immediately after me. We had not been in touch for a couple of months or possibly a year. for reasons that pertain to family dynamics. As everybody does know, when you do have siblings, you can fight, you can quarrel, lots of things can happen, and then somebody says, I don't want to speak to you, for a couple of months, and then out of that scenario, the last thing I heard that my sister had passed away, and she had been suffering with a heart condition, which meant that her heart stopped working, and she couldn't make it any longer. It's a very sad kind of weekend for me, as myself and my family back home, and those who are wherever they are. We are trying to cope with this. We are trying to arrange to see that her wishes can be met, whether she can be repatriated back home for a burial, and if that's not possible, then we shall have to see what else could be available. So in that respect, I'm calling upon the Ugandan network in Canada. I think crucially for the important thing is that since she's passed away, she has left behind 2 children who have not been living in the country for a very long period of time, and it is possible that those children will be devastated, by what has happened. One of those kids is just 13 years old. We do not have an extended family network in Canada, so it is important, that the Ugandan Canadian community steps into the arena at this point in time and try to see what kind of support can possibly be available to these young people. But I think that is besides the point. Let's carry on the discussion, Henry, and all the other issues can be considered outside this meeting. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much again. Chitalo nnyo kubeera nti ofiiriddwako mwannyoko. It is not beside the point. I think it's an important aspect to this conversation because we are talking about citizens, diaspora Ugandans. And when we talk about diaspora Ugandans, we have to remember that sometimes we go back home when we are still alive, but there are times when we go back home when we are in caskets. And if you're going back in caskets and we do not have that dual citizenship, if we were citizens of other countries and carrying different passports, how is that going to be dealt with? Because it's not mentioned in the law that the act, the Immigration Act or the dual citizenship, Citizenship Act that we are going to discuss here today. But before we delve into that conversation, I just want to get a few comments from you regarding the independence that happened yesterday, what you think about it, and whether you think we are heading in the right direction. Before you start, I'm going to play something done by the BBS, thoughts of people who are on the ground in Kampala and what they think about independence.
Tugenda kujaguza emyaka 5 mwenda nga Uganda chefu na amefuga chiche wanyumiriza mu nsi yo kati okutwalira emyaka 5
ubona
bonye emyaka 5 mwenda
chene nyumiriza
birungi byolaba mu nsi sina siko kunyigiriza mu nsi
no mulimo gwenkola gonyigiriza
kuno kwa bodaboda
esem
kunyize kuti
bodaboda yagira ku miliyoni 2 kati ya miliyoni 5
naye Uganda yaffe eno buli mwaka mbadde mmanyi nti buli mwaka bwe guwera tweyongera kukula naye buli mwaka bwe guwera tweyongera kudda wansi simanyi kiva ku ki
kando kikozeemu ki gwe ngo
sina kye nnakozeemu olw'ensonga misolo mingi batumalako emirembe kale
bwendo olina tafaali lyogase ku nsi
teririiko
lwaki
olw'embeera eriwo obeera
onyumiriza okuba munauganda ensi yo gyagala
singa nfuna passport esobose eggwanga singa nvaamu kuba siina mulamwa
lwaki ensi mwagiko wa Uganda
olukyafuna ssente tunyigirizibwa okola n'okolera bwereere sikale bakwata zonna azitwala owakansa akunyigiriza omusirikale akunyigiriza obudde twakoleranga mu bwasalika alina olwekyo netulya nga twekyayi
olina kitono kyo atiisa katono konyumiriza okuba munauganda nga munauganda
siina kwaseyagalya mu nsi.
All right. I know so many rosy pictures have been going around, which is good. We need to talk about the good aspects of the country and what makes people happy. There are so many different events in so many different diaspora communities celebrating independence. On the other hand, when you look at these testimonies from Kampala on the ground, things may not be as well as they could be. And I wonder what your thoughts are. I wonder what people back home are telling you about independence celebrations. At 59, are we on the right track? I want to start with who wants to start? Bakasara, unmute yourself. Start. Start the conversation. Let's go.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll start the conversation, and thank you for the opportunity. And again, Julius, my condolences, and I agree with Henry. It's not besides the point. That is actually the point why we're here. So to start the conversation, what Uganda at 59? What does it mean for me? I saw in one of the clips that you just played, where the young man was talking about that feeling persecuted, restrained, whatever the correct definition is in English.
Right.
And I also happen to be one of the have listened to the. Can you hear me? I happen to also have listened to the Kabaka's speech.
Right.
Yeah, and he also talked about that some aspect of so it is there, it's present. And you are right. We come out of a very beautiful place. And for some of us, it's even a double. In Toro, where I come from, we call it the pearl in the pearl of Africa. Right. So you cannot come out of a place like Toro and say there's nothing good about Uganda. It will just be inconsistent with even the place that you come from. But the journey has been long. It has been challenging for historical reasons, and also the self-inflicted wounds, the unforced errors that we have seen so often. So it's a mixed bag. We have the good things, and we have the not so good things that are happening in Uganda. What I don't agree with are these silos where we've picked ourselves and placed ourselves. If somehow I point something that is wrong or going wrong in Uganda, people think I don't love Uganda. That's a false narrative. And on the other side, if people who are saying, oh, Uganda is so good, Uganda is so good, on this side, maybe quite often we label them as the people who are oblivious to the suffering of our fellow Ugandans. But the truth of the matter is, well, the truth is actually in the middle. It's just that these conversations have to highlight that truth. We need to be able to talk about the good of Uganda, the Uganda we know, and the Uganda we aspire to see. At the same time, also pinpoint where we have challenges, where we have these enforced errors in the human rights area, in missed opportunities in flagrant economy, and the issues that we're about to talk about regarding dual citizenship and the freedoms of our important diaspora community, where the government can do, what the government can do, where they can help us to help our motherland. So those are conversations that can take place at the same time. We don't have to pick either or. So for me, Uganda at 59, happy independence. We have a long way to go. We have a whole bunch of things to fix. And they say, let's get to work. It's going to be the duty of everyone, including us who are privileged and living in these places. But the people at home have to also give us a chance to market our country differently. I was on a similar show yesterday, and I talked and highlighted the importance of our ambassadorship roles. We are the ambassadors of Uganda in this country, in Canada, in the US, wherever we are as Ugandans. We're the ambassadors. Whether the government of Uganda likes that or not, they're not going to be able to change it. I know before we came out live, we were having a conversation about paper pushers in the halls of power. Yeah, actually somebody cleaning Joe Biden's office, if they happen to be Ugandan, that person has access to Joe Biden that the president of Uganda or the ambassador of Uganda doesn't have. And for them, when they start talking and they ask them, where are you from? And they say, I'm from Uganda. They're going to have the same conversations that you just played for us on the streets of Kampala. They're going to talk about Uganda from their personal perspective. If that perspective is good, that's the message they will give Joe Biden. If that perspective is one of being oppressed, that's the perception they will give Joe Biden. And then you would wonder, why hasn't our president been invited to sit for a sit down with the president of the US in the White House? Well, that could be the reason that the person who cleans his office is Ugandan. And they have just represented Uganda before even your ambassador gets there. So that's the importance that I wanted to highlight, at least today, for the government of Uganda to realize that we are the ambassadors of Uganda here. How the government treats us is the personal perspective that we will talk to or that we will advance when we meet Americans, Canadians, or wherever we are across the globe. It's the lens that we see, the Uganda that we will present will be through our personal lenses. So how can Uganda help? Well, there's some unforced errors. Human rights. If you oppress my brother in Uganda, the people who are being jailed and thrown in jail and killed and summarily, all those people have relatives, and some of them are outside Uganda. You cannot tell me that I should give only a beaming picture of Uganda and not talk about the ills of Uganda, as how the president was suggesting the other day in his speech, that we're noisemakers and we have our issues. And no, we are making noise, or at least some of the things we're making noise about are real, and they are real to us. If you've jailed my brother, I'm going to talk, I'm going to scream. I will talk to every co-worker in my office about that experience. When I take a day off to deal with that personal matter, I will discuss it with my bosses. Say, hey, I'm going to take a day, we have to make calls to lawyers in Uganda, my brother's in jail. I'm representing Uganda. And when you meet that person, that's the impression of Uganda that they will have. So it's not that we're out here purposely giving Uganda a bad name, or somebody has paid us off to go badmouth Uganda in our circles. No, we are representing Uganda from our personal experiences. It's incumbent upon the government of Uganda and the leaders of Uganda to recognize that and give us the good stories, give us the good personal experiences that we can use to highlight a better Uganda. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bakasara. You have said it so well, and I think it's very important for people to realize that the personal is communal and the communal is personal. So I only describe the beauty of my community through the lens that that community has treated me. That's how I explain the beauty of my community or the ugliness of my community. And another thing, mu Luganda tulina olugero olugamba nti ensowera ekwagala yekugwa ku bbwa. That fly that does not like you, tejja kujja kukubeera ku bbwa lyo. It won't come to suck your wound. It's only that fly that is fond of you, literally, that will come and suck your wound. So many people in the diaspora who speak a lot about what's going on, bogera kubanga bagala ensi yaabwe, they're proud of Uganda. So bajja nga Mwami Bakasara bwagambye, bwafuna ekizibu about his family members, the people we interact with on a daily basis, other people we work with, right? So Mr. Bakasara, who is in the federal government of the US, who works in the federal government within some of the sections of the federal government of the USA, his immediate friends are those people that he works with on a daily basis. He spends much more time with them than he even spends with his family. So when he's having conversations, when you're having conversations at work, we have personal conversations sometimes. We have work conversations, but the way we become productive, the way we produce what we produce is because we also talk about our personal lives. That's how we connect. That's how we become effective in our workplaces. And if I am talking to my work colleague and tell them about Uganda, how is Uganda? This is what is happening. And this is how the government is behaving. My friend might even have more chips on his shoulders. When my friend goes and talks to Biden or whoever they have, the influencer in that community, guess what they're going to talk about? Henry Nyangambi what ne what? Chobola bayagala taking a time off. Yeah, but to Uganda. Ngagenda nganonya. So if you want a good report about Uganda, do your part and do the right thing. Build the country that you want to be portrayed. And I think this is where the issue of how people in the diaspora are being treated should be looked at very critically by the legislators of our country, the policymakers. Think about how the policies that you draft affect the people on the ground. How are street level bureaucrats interacting with these policies and how are they affecting them? For example, who were the people from the diaspora who were consulted when the dual citizenship policy or act was being drafted? If that room did not have any voices from the diaspora, how could the people who are not in the diaspora explain or interpret our life experiences? Abantu abatali mu diaspora batwogera bata experiences zaffe ze bata living. These are the things we want to talk about. We spend over, I think the diaspora spends over $3 billion a year. Sending it to Uganda, either through micro helping family, friends, or through big investments. So you still want us to be part of Uganda. If you still want us to be part of Uganda, think about the policies you're drafting. And I know this policy has been around since 2009, I believe. But now that this the implementation, we need to talk about the implementation. We probably need to revisit these conversations, because while you have so many people saying that everything you are doing is in the best interest of the people in the diaspora, are we in agreement of what you guys are saying? My spokesperson ibamwe abogera abantu babeera mu diaspora. How long have they been living in the diaspora? if they are living in the diaspora now. Right? We don't just need a desk, a diaspora desk in a consulate or embassy. We need to be equal stakeholders. But I'm not the one. I want to give an opportunity to the two panelists. This is the reason I have only diasporas on this conversation, because I feel like the voices of the diasporanians need to go straight to the policymakers in Uganda. Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali, you are a lawyer. I don't know if you have read the act, but I believe you have. What are your thoughts on this conversation as we proceed?
Thanks, Henry. I don't want to adopt a very legalistic approach. I want to be a little bit more practical, to look at the practical issue that we are faced with. Yes, in terms of the law, I'm very familiar with the law. It's not the first time I'm coming across it. I think there was a time when the issue of dual citizenship became a very hot subject here in the United Kingdom. But I think they were encouraging people to register for dual citizenship, and I think the embassy, the Ugandan embassy, the Ugandan consulate here went out full scale to try to encourage people. They ran lots of focus groups and consultations. Well, not consultations, but they had a little bit of dialogue between here and there, encouraging people to go and register for dual citizenship and so on and so forth. And I know a number of people, some of whom are my personal friends, who went through that process. So since that time, I've kind of been familiar, with that kind of process, although not to the detail that I bring to the table today. So I think both of you do raise very, pertinent issues there. We're hearing concepts like consultations, dialogue, policy initiatives, and so on and so forth. And the question is, what's the role of the diaspora people in all this? Where are their voices, and how accurately have their voices, their aspirations, their interests, how have those been taken into account when some of these policies have been brought on the board? So those are really very, very critical issues. But before I delve into that, I want to reference, the videos that you've played, for the audience and for ourselves, to set the debate, to set the context. I think for me, from what I see there is what I refer to as the pulse of the nation. If you really want to understand, if you want to gauge the atmosphere, the correct atmosphere pertaining in the country or actually in any community, I think it's best that you go and speak to the people at the grassroots, because these are the people who really get to feel the actual effects of these policy initiatives when they are being applied. It's not, I don't think that those who are privileged, and when I say privileged, people who sit in high-end profile offices, people who don't visit downtown, people who drive in, those nice cushioned Range Rovers and so on and so on and so forth. I don't think they feel the effects of the desperation as much as the rest of the wananchi, the people on the grassroots, who have to fend for themselves, looking for food for today and tomorrow. So I think that's why I refer to those conversations as the pulse of the nation, and they are very instructive in making us understand how desperate things have become over the years. The Americans, they set their constitution, the entire narrative, they set it around the concept of the pursuit of happiness, And I think, you need to ask a typical Ugandan. All of us are in pursuit of the same thing. We are all in pursuit of happiness. How many Ugandans are happy? Maybe that's the very subjective question to ask, because happiness, can be defined, on so many parameters. But I think that's really the gist of the point I'm trying to make, is that pursuit of happiness, the pursuit, the sheer ability, the confidence for you to go out and work for your sweat and be able to believe that you'll get something out of it, which also you can also be able to bequeath, maybe to your dependents or your offsprings or the people you leave behind after you've gone. I mean, how are we doing in that respect in terms of gauging what sorts of progress we are making? We all do have relatives. I mean, you just need to speak to people randomly. And people will tell you, there are so many people who are desperate, actually. People are trying to escape what has now become almost a danger zone for them, at least economically speaking, what has become a danger zone for them, where survival really has now become an issue of life and death, you know? So that is really important. So the question that I would ask myself is that, you know, the people who negotiated our independence in 1962, what did they have in mind? What did they envision? And if we benchmark, how much progress have we made towards attaining those visions of the people who negotiated our independence? For me, as somebody from a legal background, you know, some of the things that are really crucial for me are things like you know, justice and fairness, you know, equality of all of us, you know, before the eyes of the law, you know. If that kind of uniform application of the law is something that really bothers me and concerns me a lot. I think you see lots of things coming up from that side, and it's just very difficult for you to justify them. It's just very difficult for you to justify them. You really ask yourself, the people who are behind these sorts of things, what is their state of mind? You know, as a mental health lawyer, that definitely comes to my mind. What is their state of mind? You know, because your mind has to be sick, you know, for you to engage into something that you clearly, that everybody can clearly see that it's unlawful, that it's illegal, and you continue to pursue it like there is no consequence. I think I've described our current state of affairs to the effect that we possibly have the soul of the nation is sick. And I think we need redemption. And I'm using those two words, the sickness of the soul and redemption. I'm using them purposefully because that's exactly where we are. That's the problem. And we need that redemption. Albert has hinted on a number of things there, which I just want to say that I agree with him. You know, we the diasporans, I mean, let's try to deconstruct this concept of the diaspora. Who is the diaspora really? What does the term diaspora mean? What is the definition of the term diaspora? You know, from my research, I've come up with a definition that was given by a chap called Gabriel Schaeffer. He said that those ethnic minority groups of migrant people, you know, residing or acting in a host country, but maintaining strong sentiments and link with their countries of origins. They are the people who become to be defined as migrants. And African, you know, Ugandans, lots of people in Uganda always want to reference this concept of Pan-Africanism. Even the African Union, you know, has something to say about, you know, the African Union diaspora agenda, which says people of African origin living outside the continent, irrespective of their citizenship and nationality, and they are willing to contribute to the development of the continent. That's the description of who the diaspora are. There has been an evolution of the concept of diaspora, because previously people have always looked at us with despise, you know. That term, Kubacheyo, the description of that term was meant to despise people, you know. But I think diaspora has evolved from that into highly very skilled people, you know, who have got a lot of opportunities and potential that if our home countries, if our home governments invest their effort and energy in good faith in the people in the diaspora, I think there is a lot that can be, you know, gained from that. You know, we are the face within which, the image I portray about myself, Henry, Albert, the image anybody living in the diaspora, the image that you cast there and portray to these people that we meet on a day-to-day basis tells a lot about the country Uganda, much more than the billions and billions of US dollars that are invested to go into these, you know, Dubai expos and so on and so forth. You know, I saw somebody, a so-called consultant at the Dubai Expo, somebody I think from a background that was not African, but that was not Ugandan, if I should put it that way, speaking on behalf of the Ugandans in the diaspora, and he couldn't even, he couldn't even explain what the country has to offer, other than saying that we have the equator. Is that the best that we can do as a country, really? Are there no people in the diaspora who can do? I mean, if you gave me an opportunity to speak for Uganda before an audience, I can bet you, without script, I can find something that can hit the internet and produce millions and millions of hits.
Mr. Butera was doing a great job last weekend, speaking about Uganda and what it has to offer. The good things it has to offer. But like when you reference that, I think is a gentleman from India, because I could detect from his accent, of course, that he might be speaking for Uganda right now, but his roots are probably from somewhere in India.
My judgment is that the job wasn't good enough.
It was.
It wasn't.
I don't think it was. Yeah.
But I think that is really the context of this conversation. There are lots of opportunities. People in the diaspora, they involve themselves in businesses, in trade, in tourism. They contribute towards poverty alleviation schemes. They contribute towards the foreign direct investment. These are things, they are no brainers. Everybody knows that. Even speaking about these sorts of things like this looks like you're just cramming, stuff that you've come across on the internet. But there's no genius here. I think. For me, I always want to believe that the people who are in charge of our affairs, they lack good faith. And whenever you do something in bad faith, the chances are that you're going to get it wrong, Because, for instance, as Henry, you asked the question that, where are the voices of the diaspora people? For instance, in the policy that we are going to be discussing today about, these visa requirements for indigenous Ugandans going back home, you need to produce ABCD, fair enough, and we'll look at that when it comes to that. But I think Henry did ask a very fundamental question there and said, where is the voice of how? Because from what I remember, there was a World Bank forum that took place in Washington around November 2007. Which in that forum, I think the World Bank was trying to engage with various stakeholders, governments, non-government organizations, and so many other, entities, trying to encourage governments from different places to come up, to create environments, that enable immigrant communities to be able to participate in positive initiatives back in their home countries. So the incentives, there need to be incentives, good incentives that can get somebody to say that, okay, what am I giving up in return for what? So where we have those elements of, and I'm not saying it's what it is, but apparent, it does appear like that there is an element of bad faith when some of these policies are being constructed. And because there is that apparent bad faith in the way policies are designed and the way they are implemented, it kind of creates a problem of the legitimacy of those kind of policies. And when we say legitimacy, we're talking about failure to take into account what is the impact, of the policy that you're going to implement. What is the impact on a target group of people? So for me, that's what I would say. So am I happy with the 59 years of independence in Uganda? It's a question of yes and no. I'm happy that we celebrate independence, but we also need to ask the question that what are we really celebrating? Are we really independent when we still have situations where people still arrest members of parliament in a blatantly kind of criminal kind of fashion? Are we independent when you can be arrested for no apparent reason, and you are kept in jail or in a police cell for more than 48 hours, which is guaranteed by our constitution? Are we independent then? Because those are the things about justice, the protection of civil liberties, people's liberties, the free trial, free and fair trial, that if something goes wrong, you should have the confidence that, okay, I'll be put before a competent court which shall judge me on the basis of the evidence available. And if I'm found guilty, then I'll be convicted. But you would have gone through due process. And I think in a lot of things that we tend to see, there is that lack of due process, which creates lots of problems, for many of us. So for me, that is the angle from which I see these sorts of things.
This is a lot of content that we need to digest, delve into, try to analyze and see how tugenda kuyamba tutya abantu baffe. Mwami Bakasara talked about his roots being from Toro, and the fact that Toro is the pearl of Africa, which I like that. When I heard this statement, all that came to mind was that I could be carrying a Canadian passport and I may not have a Ugandan passport for that matter. Naye nsigala ndi musajja Muganda, nsigala nze Saalisa ekitoleko muzzukulu wa Mugema. Aina attachment nga mwami Mitala bwagambye nti mbeera mu diaspora naye nga nina attachments wajenva. I am a Canadian, nina Canadian passport, naye nsigala ndi musajja Muganda, olulimi ndutegeera, bajjajja bange mbamanyi, amataka gaffe manyi we gali, buli limu manyi we liri. Omuntu bw'ajja n'aŋŋamba nti nno olw'okubanga tolina katabo ka Uganda, olina okubeera ng'olina dual citizenship, okubeera ng'okyalina attachment ku Uganda. What comes to your mind, especially when the law specifically states very clearly that every person born in Uganda is a citizen. Every person whose parents or grandparents is or was a member of the indigenous communities existing and residing within the borders of Uganda, as at the first day of February 1926, and set out in the third schedule of the Constitution of Uganda in Article 10A of the Constitution. If that person who was born in Uganda is therefore a citizen of Uganda, olw'okubanga nkutte passport ya Canada, kitegeeza ki nti no nina kusooka okubikaminga reattached to Uganda? I have to make a registration. Ngate wano gwe kenyini gongambe nti every person born in Uganda, even though when we look at the Constitution they come back and tell us in Article Article 13, I think, citizenship by nationalization, citizenship by prohibition of dual citizenship. I think in the prohibition of dual citizenship, here they say that subject to this article, it is Article 15 of the Constitution, a Ugandan citizen shall hold another country concurrently with his or her Ugandan citizenship. They go ahead and also say that a citizen of Uganda shall cease forthwith to be a citizen of Uganda if, on attaining the age of 18 years, he or she by voluntary act other than marriage acquires or retains the citizenship of a country other than Uganda. Kitegeera tukaddemu tukasomako bulungi nti a citizen of Uganda shall cease forthwith to be a citizen of Uganda if, on attaining the age of 18 years, he or she by voluntary act other than marriage acquires or retains the citizenship of another of a country other than Uganda. Kitegeera? I know, Bakasara, you are not a lawyer, but you're an MBA. I don't know what you understand by that. What can you tell Ugandans regarding that? What does that mean? And like, do I have? Proceed. Sorry. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, what I can say regarding this law, and yes, it is true. I'm not a lawyer, but some of these things you don't need to be a lawyer to interpret. And I'm not by any means minimizing the important work that Julius and others do, but they don't practice a different language. These things are written in plain English, and we also have examples elsewhere to look at. So I can only abuse what our land friends did in that parliament in enacting that act as either misinformed or trying to do this the copy and paste that our leaders are so used to. And I'm not saying this to demean our leaders. Some of them are now in elders. I'm talking about the group that did this law in 2012, and some of them are land. But being land and being a lawyer and being in parliament does not really mean that somehow you completely understand these issues or you even foresee the impact that Julius talked about. So I attribute that to just being this job that we keep doing of copying these things, but never really copying the guidelines that come with it. It's like buying a brand new car and never really getting that manual with it. And we do that quite often in our African countries. The law that was enacted in 2012 cannot be constitutional. It cannot, as you explained it. It's just that Ugandans have been drinking from a fire hose, and no one among us in the diaspora have had the time or the resources or even the commitment to actually go challenge that law in the constitutional courts, even in Uganda. Why is it not constitutional? Well, first of all, an act of parliament contradicts a right that is enshrined in the Constitution. That's just unconstitutional. As a matter of fact, if I can make a comparison to the US immigration law, and why do I make the comparison? Because really, most of our laws are from the English law, the Tort and Criminal Act. And the US, just like Uganda, also copied their laws from the English laws and just made some adjustments here and there. So if we don't understand these laws, why not go and look at these laws where these things are derived from or originated from? But I don't think our friends did that. They just wanted to do an act. For example, in the US, the 14th Amendment and the process that makes you a citizen, it says just like in Uganda. So they kind of copied the language, but not entirely or even understand how the US does it or the UK does it. It says if you are born in these borders, for example, in the US, if you're born in these borders and you are a US citizen, you're a US citizen by birth. And I know you guys have heard this argument made by our politicians and leaders from Uganda. Said, oh, no, when you took up Canadian citizenship, especially for us in the US here, they say when you took up the US citizenship, it required you to renounce Ugandan citizenship. They're half correct. The US law of naturalization, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, requires foreigners who become American citizens to renounce citizenship and pledge allegiance to the US. It is true. However, it does not require the same for a natural-born American. If you're born here, my son, if my son today wants to become a Ugandan citizen, the US has no impediments on him because they first value the constitutional right in the 14th Amendment. They cannot. It actually says Congress or anyone cannot make a law that
strips off
that disenfranchises the rights that are enshrined in that 14th Amendment for my son.
The same thing with Canada.
Canada. Somebody from Kenya and they want to become, that's a different process. So in other words, if Uganda wanted to copy, or if they had copied these English laws and they actually had brought the money that and guidelines that came with it, they should have recognized that you cannot take Albert Bakasara's rights away because they are enshrined in the Odochi Constitution of 1995. So in the 2012, they should have made a law, like they did, but it should only have catered to the Rwandese refugees, the Congolese refugees, the South Sudanese refugees who are entering the country. Say, hey, you guys want to become citizens of Uganda? Renounce you can't be Ugandan and Sudanese. That's understandable. Okay, because they are naturalized citizens, just like the US does. But you cannot take away a right that is enshrined in the Constitution. Those people who are coming in, who want to become Ugandans, don't have that right. They were not born in Uganda. Let's talk about the impact that Julius talked about. The impact is huge. And again, the arguments from our leaders in Uganda is that, oh, you guys in the diaspora, you're the ones who asked for dual citizenship. Yeah. But after that, we were never at the table to discuss the implementation of that act. So now we are in here where the government has started looking at us, and I'm going to say this, as a security threat. It's really all the commotion that is going on now. It's just that the government has changed the way it views us. We're no longer now an asset. Okay? All eyes now are towards the east. They're looking at China with this cheap money and stuff. Of course, we'll pay a price. Our children will pay a price years down the road. So now we have studied, our kids are studied, we're in the US, we're in Canada, we're everywhere. We're becoming affluent. And our people in Uganda are looking at us as a threat instead of an asset. So it's that change that is requiring these things now. You have to register, you have to do what? Yeah, and these laws that they're bringing. But they're going to have a negative impact on our relationship with our motherland. They are going to alienate us, and they're going to alienate our children from Uganda. And again, this goes into the conversation that we started with. How do you do that to me and expect me to be a good ambassador of my motherland? I won't.
Right. Yeah.
Not because I don't love Uganda. It's just that the narrative that I will be giving will be coming from that personal perspective. So again, we as a group, as leaders in the diaspora, as community activists, we have to somehow figure out a way to start talking to these people, and maybe forcefully. If we have to demonstrate, they say that demonstrations matter, but they do matter. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking about them. If we have to talk, petition our host countries to interact with Uganda on our behalf, we need to, because these things are impactful. And first of all, the law itself is incomplete and was done haphazardly. For example, before I came to the United States of America, I owned property in total. Part of it was hereditary. Part of it I had bought with my own money. So if I don't decide to become a natural, to do the process that they're forcing me to do to become a dual citizenship, suppose I don't want to be a dual citizen, what happens to my property? Because the law in 2012 took away my right to become a Ugandan or to remain a Ugandan, but it did not take away my right to own property in Uganda. And if it took away my right to own property in Uganda, it never catered for the property that I already owned.
Right.
Because even in Amin's time, I mean, when Amin just started Indians, there was actually a board. I think it's still there, the Departed Asians Property Custodian Board.
Right.
To kind of govern the the properties of the
property
of those Ugandans like that. So what is there to cater for Albert Bakasara's property if he does not want to become a dual citizen?
Right.
So these are the matters that we have to discuss with the policymakers in Uganda. Yes, I'm not a lawyer, but like I said, these are not really complicated matters. Some of them are so basic that even men and women can understand. The selfishness of looking at us now as a security threat because somehow we are becoming more affluent, we are no longer Nkubakeyos, and now we may actually have access to some power, levels of power. It's just short-sighted on behalf of our leaders. It's short-sighted because the millions and millions and millions of dollars that and pounds and all that we're sending to Uganda is actually helping the government. The services we're providing, the businesses we're supporting, the education, the systems, and paying school fees, and all that is actually helping grow the country. So for somebody to just want to antagonize that system just to stay in power, looking at being fearful of your own shadow and that kind of stuff is really short-sighted. The government should continue, as it had for many, many years, to look at us as an asset, put in place mechanisms that work for both of us. We should have this relationship of mutual respect, mutual benefit. Yeah. So that's my perspective on this immigration law, and that is changing by the hour, by the way, because I recently heard that now the fees have been reduced from
400 to 200. Yeah, the fees have been.
You guys complained now. It's instead of $400, you can pay $200.
Yeah, no, you can pay 200.
I don't want to pay 200. And some of us have reasons why we don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Ate onyonyodde bulungi ekintu ky'amateeka ekyo nti bw'oba ofuna akatabo ka US oba ka Canada, you swear allegiance to your new country. But omu Canada yenna oba mu America ne baba basazeewo nga yazaalibwa mu America, omuntu eyazaalibwa mu America oba mu Canada bw'asalawo okufuna citizenship ey'ensi endala, he does not cease to be a citizen of Canada or the US by birth. That is something that Ugandan legislators need to look at. Nze passport yange newankubadde nkutte akatabo ka Canada egamba born in Mengo, Uganda. It says born in Mengo, Uganda.
Yes.
Why would I need?
Mine as well.
Exactly. Why would I need to register to become a citizen by registration? I was born in Mengo, Uganda. Even my Canadian passport recognizes it. Passport yenye, in fact, nalibadde sasula na visa kuyingira Uganda kubanga passport ya Canada gye nkutte egamba born in Mengo, Uganda. Citizen by birth. You can't strip that away. You can't. How do you strip that away from me? Nonga matateka tim becoming a citizen by registration. What do you mean by that? What does that mean? Nga amateka genyini go referencing agagamba nti omwana bobanga tatawo oba jjajjaawo yali citizen of one of those was a member of those indigenous communities. Indigenous being the key word. communities. Omwana wo nze ne bwe mbazadde omwana wano automatically alina kubeera Munnayuganda kubanga nze nazaalibwa Uganda n'embeerayo more than 10 years. Ate ne bajjajja bange bazaalibwa Uganda ne taata wange yazaalibwa Uganda. My child by default should be kati omwana nakasatwe omwana wa muzzukulu wange azaliddwa wano yatalina kubeera Munnayuganda naye ne muzzukulu wange alina kubeera muki Munnayuganda bw'aba ayagala because of me and my dad. Kitegeera because of his dad and me kwanze mbeera grand kikoma ku grand according to the law. So ekitegeeza muzzukulu wange yatalina kubeera ki actually mutabani wa muzzukulu wange yatalina kubeera Munnayuganda according to the law. Right? Kati bangamba batya nti nno nze yazaalibwa Uganda ate I register to become a Ugandan by registration. What does that mean? If they're willing to strip away my citizenship by birth, what's going to happen to my citizenship by registration? How easy is it going to be for them to strip it away from me? Ma'am Mitala, your response to Mr. Bakazara's submission.
First of all, I want to acknowledge my limitation on this subject. That I am not a constitutional expert. You know, I think these matters, because of the nature of what they are as constitutional issues, I think they need to go back to very good experts in this area. And I think Albert has raised an issue there that perhaps it's about time that somebody should think about, you know, challenging some of these, you know, legislations in a court of law so that we can get clarity on that matter, because I think looks like there is an injustice that has been done, or there is an injustice that's being committed, but you know, it still sits on the law, and as long as it still sits on the law, then the only duty you have is to comply with the law. Otherwise you find yourself, you know, operating in an unlawful kind of illegal fashion, which is kind of counterproductive to you as an individual. So there is that issue. But you see, I think there is two issues here. There is the issue of citizenship, and then there is the issue of immigration control. And I think those needs to be addressed separately. In terms of citizenship, yes, I can see the inconsistency in the law. Unfortunately, you know, if you follow the rules of, you know, legal interpretation, if you're reading the Constitution, you're reading it from up down, you know, clause by clause, article by article, yeah. So you look at Article 10, which specifies on the specification of the indigenous Ugandans, somebody who is born indigenous in Uganda is a citizen, and you know, that is something that would be very awkward for somebody to suggest that they are taking it away for whatever reason. And then you proceed, you know, down the sequence. There's so many other provisions in there, and I think it's the loss of citizenship, which is I think that loss of citizenship, in my understanding, if I put it and run it through my head, my understanding is that it should apply to loss of citizenship that has been obtained by registration, not loss of citizenship which is acquired by birth by somebody who is an indigenous Ugandan, because that is who I am. And are you saying that, you know, I'm no longer Ugandan? And I think this is it's a hot subject, and I don't want to appear to bring in, you know, views that are rather uninformed, because I think we need to approach this subject very objectively as knowledgeable people, and be able to provide, you know, answers and guidance for those who might find themselves in this kind of predicament. But in principle, as a person, yes, I do have all reservations, you know. I've seen situations in I think I remember a woman here, but it's common to find, you know, British people here who do not have passports, and because of the environment we find ourselves in today, it's very possible to be rounded up and you become an illegal, you know, stayer in the country, because there is no document that talks about you. But there are people who are born here and they don't have a wish or a desire to travel anywhere. They don't wish to go on holiday. They are people who are just doing their stuff here. They don't travel anywhere else, and therefore there is no need for them to have a passport on them, and there's no requirement for them to acquire a passport or anything like that, or any form of documentation that kind of specifies what their nationality is. But then it's possible for you to find yourself in a situation, and there has been a situation of that kind here, where this girl, actually, she was born here. Her grandparents were British proper, and she was raided up. And she was able to rectify that problem because she could point to a very old piece of legislation somewhere, which pointed to the fact that her father was or her grandfather was British. You know, so that is how the issue of being an indigenous person comes into play. I think the former Katikkiro of Uganda, Omwami Owekitiibwa Muliika, has talked extensively about this subject. You know, I think people should now begin to get a little bit more interested in some of the things that he has said, because sometimes people say wise things and we look away like we've not heard, or because they do not impact on us in that material time, only to wake up and realize that, oh, this is something that has got, you know, far-reaching implications for lots of people. So there is a problem there on the question of citizenship. As I've said before, in the current sign, I mean, there are options, you know. Number one, I think it's a question of judgment. You weigh. People now need to weigh for themselves. How do they want to navigate this kind of awkward situation? Because for somebody might say, all right, okay, I've taken citizenship of another country. What do I really have to lose? You know, I could go and do the registration and I become a dual citizen, and then you know, life goes on. I don't really care. Somebody might take issue with the fact that as we are taking issue here to the fact that, you know, there is something there that strips away your citizenship at birth. That doesn't sit well anywhere. But as I said, I think it might be helpful if maybe this matter, you know, is now litigated in the Constitutional Court, so that we can get some very clear guidance on that, some clear guidance and clarity, so that that matter can be settled. What I find to be interesting is that our constitution tends to be quite more prohibitive in most of the things that it says. It says you shall not do this, so and so shall not do this. So I mean, I'll give you an example. The provision on the cultural leaders. It says to them that I think a cultural you find provisions on a cultural leader where they say a cultural leader shall not do A, B, C, D. I think it should have been better if it's the other way around. If you specify exactly what a cultural leader can do rather than specifying what they cannot do. I think that for me, that would be a more kind of attractive and more reasonable kind of approach than this prohibitive approach that we have in our constitutional document that seems to prohibit almost everything. You will not do this, you will not do this, it's kind of too prescriptive, and I find it quite difficult to reconcile myself to that kind of situation. On the other hand, and I think this is really the gist of the matter, which is causing now a lot of anxiety, the requirement that if you are, so for instance, Henry, if you are a Canadian citizen as you are, despite the fact that you are an indigenous Ugandan, if you need to visit home, you need to obtain a series of permissions, including requesting for is it an advance letter of somebody invitation, yeah, somebody inviting you to go back to your home country. That is as ridiculous as we can get. But for me, where I want to look at it, I want to look at I'm going to apply now the legalistic approach here, because I think you need, when you assess these sorts of things, first of all, you need to ask the question: is it lawful? As in the sense that, is that provision or is that requirement based on a lawful, you know, parliamentary act, lawful an act of parliament that has been passed through parliament, you know, follow the due procedures and so on and so forth. So is there a law that specifies that in order for you to come into the country, the act says you have to have A, B, C, D? Because these are policies. Mind you, obviously, the law gives the minister or secretary of state to make regulations and policies and so many other administrative measures that enable them to manage and administer, a certain program. So that's the question number one that we need to find out. Is that policy or is that provision, is it based on a lawful parliamentary act? I'm hoping that it is. The second question we would be asking ourselves that, is it necessary? The issue of necessity now comes in, Is it necessary? And what kind of objective, what objective is being sought after? What is the objective behind that policy initiative? What does it achieve? So it's the question of necessity there. That needs to be answered. And I think this is why I want people who are behind these kind of policies, so that they shouldn't hide behind their desks and computers. They should be able to come out and engage the general public. These are kind of issues of legitimate public interest. They should come and give an explanation. What are they trying to achieve? What are the sorts of discussions that have, against which this kind of policy measures have been implemented? So there is that question, the question of lawfulness. There's the question of necessity, and of course there's the question of proportionality. Is it proportionate? The application of the policy, is it proportionate? Now, when you talk about proportionate, you need to judge. You need to make a judgment. Who does it affect, and what is the implication? Now, this is where it gets very controversial, and okay, because when you look at the application of this policy, in fairness, it's not being targeted towards people in the diaspora, strictly Ugandans in the diaspora. I think the policy is being targeted generally towards anybody who requires a visa to visit Uganda, whether they are Kenyan, whether they are British, whether they are Americans, wherever they are, as long as that is who you are and you want to go home, that's one of the requirements. So I think from that point of view, I wouldn't say that it is disproportionate or it is discriminatory in nature, that it discriminates against people from in the diaspora, generally speaking. Now, this is the application of the legal principles. I'm looking at those legal principles as I would apply them if I had to litigate that kind of issue. You see what I mean? So looking behind the policy, what does really the policy tend to achieve? And I want us really to benchmark here. A couple of days ago, as the COVID situation improves, I've been thinking of going on holiday, because I've not been on holiday for quite a long time. I've been thinking of going on holiday, and one of the things I was thinking about, before I learned about the death of my sister, I was thinking that maybe I should go and visit the US. I've never been to the US before, so I was thinking maybe I should go and visit the US. So I went onto their website, and I had this in the back of what I was doing. And I went onto the American Embassy website, looked at their visa requirements. There is a very lengthy form that you've got to complete. It's really lengthy. It will take you almost about 30 minutes to complete, and you have to keep on saving it, because if you don't save, it kind of freezes, and by the time you come back, you've lost all the information. You've got to restart again. But the form is complicated. And it gets too bad to the point that it even requires you to provide your social media handles, your Twitter handle, your Facebook handle, and any other social media platforms where you are active. It requires you to complete a history of your working history for the last 5 years. It requires you to state exactly who you are visiting in the United States. If it's a hotel, you need to provide all the information, their address, contact number, or if I'm coming to visit a private individual like Albert, you need to provide me with your phone number so that they have the phone number and so on. So it's quite a bureaucratic process. And I was I went there purposely because I wanted to benchmark on what we are being required as Ugandans and what would other countries require us to do. And I could see that possibly what Uganda is asking for is not as complex as what the United States is asking for. And this is my fair assessment. I'm trying to be as objective as I can be. Because honestly, and as uncomfortable as it sits, if I carry the British passport, and I don't, but if I did carry one and I wanted to visit home, and I'm required to get an invitation later, how difficult is that to do? Why do you complicate your life so much to that extent? You get somebody at home, get a friend. If you're not getting a friend, book into a hotel, indicate what you're going for. What's the purpose of your visit? Indicate what's the purpose of your visit. I'm coming for tourism. Get your visa, go home, do what you have to do. I mean, I think let us not allow the people who designed, for whatever bad intentions they have, for whatever bad faith they have behind their policies, let us not allow them to impede on what we need to do, for our own progress. I'm not sure whether I'm making sense here, and it's bound to, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, because when you look at current trends and issues in immigration, there are lots of problems. There is people committing immigration fraud, traveling on false identity. You got all sorts of people, terrorists, people who are involved in terrorism, murderers, rapists who are running away from places where they think their time is up, and many of them have been finding themselves amongst our own people because of the lapses in immigration control. I mean, every other country does it. Even if you want to come to Britain here today, you would have to fill in, you'd have to provide that information. You need to they require you. I mean, people who are asking for visas to come to the UK or go to Sweden or anywhere, they will tell you the kind of nightmare they have to go through to provide bank statements, with so much amount of money. So to require a foreigner, an American, a Swedish person, a German person, a Jamaican person, anybody, to require them to provide some kind of, advanced information. Let us know who you are, who are you, what are you coming to do? I think that is a legitimate. I think for me it's a legitimate request, by the state. Now I'm saying this as somebody who is very critical of of most of the things that people do in those domains. But I also want to be a little bit objective, so that we can show people exactly what is the picture and what needs to be done. I think for me that's the way I would look at that kind of. And I'm happy to be criticized. You guys are happy to disagree with me.
Yeah. Well, the thing is not disagreeing per se. I think you raise a very good point in that you are contextualizing immigration control as opposed to citizenship, which are probably two different dynamics or contexts to evaluate here. I want to take this opportunity also to remind you that this conversation is not specifically about immigration control for the country for all other people who are intending to come to Uganda. This conversation is about indigenous Ugandans, and all the references that have been made have been based on the fact that we are discussing indigenous Ugandans going back to Uganda. Omuntu alina kitaawe afudde, muzeeyi wange afudde, ngenda muziike, naye neetaaga immigration, ekyo balina okuziika muzeeyi, naye first and foremost n'okusooka nefuna invitation letter, then going through the bureaucracy nga bw'ogyogeddeko bw'olina okubeera. Do you think that's desirable? Ekyokubiri, the notion that a person who was born in Uganda has to renounce his citizenship that is given to him through birth by right. What are the implications of filling out that form, requesting for another citizenship to that country that you already attached to? Because wazaliwayo, tata we yazaliwayo, jajjayo yazaliwayo, abantu bonna bazaliwayo boli connected nabo. Naye kakati mbo bagamba olw'okubanga oyagala okujja ewaffe. By the way, in most cases abamu tuddeyo ne Uganda lwakuba twagala kubuuza ku bantu baffe, which is the biggest connection that we have there, our people, besides the property and other things. Ng'okungamba mbu you are no longer Ugandan, nga baba boogera mu kika ne babala abaana ba taata wange nange banteekamu. nga baba bambala bwe tuba twogera ku bintu ebikwatagana ku kika, there are certain decisions ze batasobola kukola nga tebakubye essimu kumbuuza ki kye ndowooza, gwe n'olowooza nti nno nina okuapplyinga in the same manner ng'omuntu eyazaalibwa e Canada ayagala ogenda e Uganda, mbu nange eyazaalibwa e Uganda nange mpite mu same processes ng'abo abantu abalala. Nga ne sizo reference nze nga America, an American, regardless of whether they are carrying a Ugandan passport, they're not going to go through the same process. You're describing that in omuntu ayagala ogenda mu America gyayitamu. If they were born in America or Canada, the processes are different. There has to be a distinction between someone who is indigenous and someone who has been naturalized or someone who is intending to visit, to be a tourist. I am not a tourist in Uganda. Siri tourist.
Henry,
I'm Ugandan by birth. That's why the Canadian passport tells me.
I get you very well. I just want to raise another kind of different law.
I know, but before you raise that, let me, Mr. Bakasala probably has his own response to you as well. Mr. Bakasala. Mr. Albert, please proceed.
Yes, Henry. So, and I appreciate Julius playing. Can you hear me? Yeah, I appreciate Julius playing the devil's advocate and looking at this from a purely legal perspective. And I agree. Compared to what the US and other places ask, Uganda's actual requirements are very, very few. But again, just as Henry is saying, and I think it was Henry who read to us the Immigration Act. It actually had an exemption in there for marriages. So I'm leaning towards what Henry is saying, and that's what I have been saying. The impact. If we are Ugandans, born in Uganda, what is so hard to do an exemption for us and leave the other Chinese and Cubans and whoever wants to visit Uganda, fill out that nice short form that you have made? Because part of it is a recognition of our contribution to our motherland. Part of it is appreciating us. And also, give us that. To say, hey, these are people who have been instrumental in building this country. So we're going to make an exemption for them to say, hey, you guys have this exemption because you were born in Uganda. So it doesn't matter whether I show up at Entebbe with an American passport or a Canadian passport. Give me some privileges. Give me something back.
Yeah.
For
umuntu yazaliwa Uganda asobola okufuna visa when arrival.
Yeah. So I'm not disputing that we should apply for some of these. Some of these things are so easy, by the way. I think even the naturalization thing that we're talking about, the form is shorter and the process is very shorter than the one that in most countries, including the US, would have. But that's besides the point. The point
it's also cheaper in Uganda.
Yes. So we should not keep having these false equivalents or false comparisons of saying, oh, the immigration and naturalization form in the US is $1,200. The one for Uganda is now $200. Why are you complaining, Albert? That's a false that's a false choice. Well, I'm complaining, and I will be complaining even if the process was $0 and I just have to take the 5 minutes to fill it. I'll still complain because I'm born and raised in Toro. I'm a Ugandan, and it's enshrined in the Constitution. that I'm a Ugandan. So I'd comply because of the basic principle of saying I'm a Ugandan. Why are you inconveniencing me to fill out a stupid form?
Exactly.
So that's where we're starting from. But I also want to impress upon you guys the other limitations, and I think these are the ones. I don't think the form and the letter and where you're going to stay, those matter much. Well, let me bring the elephant in the room. It's the land ownership matter.
Right. Exactly.
That has actually blown. It's like the lights went off once it went to the land ownership matter, where they said, "Oh, you can't own land unless you you have now become, you have applied and paid and become a dual citizen. You can't actually, even on the land, there's a different kind of land you can and cannot own. Mile versus freehold. Don't ask me the difference. Okay, so it's those, when it comes to those kind of things, then we're no longer talking about the simple
citizenship and immigration,
matter of a short form that Julius is talking about. Now you are encroaching on my inheritance. Country enough to remember a neighboring president in the early 90s who implored his countrymen who had left that country and said, this country is a very tiny country. Those of you who have made home elsewhere, please stay there. And I think you can connect the dots and remember what happened to that president. So who said, yeah, this is a small country. You guys have made home in Uganda and in Kenya and everywhere else. Please stay there. They did not stay there.
No, they came for him.
So it's the same thing. I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen to Uganda, but I guarantee you, if they are looking at us and looking at this thing as a security matter, we've got to now, well, that is a possibility that Ugandans that you are alienating and taking their land, and they may actually force their way back.
Right.
They may force their way back. Then you have a bigger security threat than the one that you tried to
mitigate. Yeah.
Exactly. So these are things, and that's why I'm appreciating these conversations. So we talk about these things instead of taking that president attitude and that country's eventuality that we should talk about these things. No, you're not going to lock me out of Uganda. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And when you do, for every action, there's a reaction.
Indeed.
And you're not going to take my land. Like I said, before I got to Uganda, to the US, I owned land that I worked. I worked with my sweat.
Yeah.
And those were not easy times. These guys that now have easy times, they can go and sign them a deal and have ghost teachers and bank money. Those were sweat. Those were not easy times in the early 90s, 80s. Those were not good times. So I can't work that hard and buy my land and you say, oh no, you cannot own my land. Well, I already own it. Or you cannot own freehold land. Well, I already own it. My father left it to me. So what do you want to do?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So those are the things that we're talking about. Do an exemption for us that recognizes our constitutional rights enshrined in the Constitution of Uganda. And start looking at us as an asset for the betterment of the country. But we have been that. We have been doing that. We've contributed a lot. Also, now we can talk about even the bail, the issue that they're talking about.
Yeah, before we talk about the bail, do you want to give Mr. Mitala an opportunity to respond to that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because I was going to relate that to the copy and paste things that we do in Uganda.
Okay, yeah.
Again, Julius is talking about the American process being very, very lengthy. But guess what? If Julius had been born in the US, he wouldn't even have to see that form.
No.
Okay. As lengthy or as short as it is, there's no short or long form for an American citizen who had taken on Cuban citizenship and stayed in Cuba for 20 years. If at one time he decided he wanted to get back to the United States, he just has to go in the big bin and dig up his passport and dust it off. And if it's expired, he just has to go to the embassy and say, "Hey, I need to renew my passport," and that's it, and come back. There's no lengthy form. So it's the same right that we're asking. So instead of them keeping and saying, "Oh, we want to be like the US," we want to be like, they should not copy and paste laws that they don't even understand how they work or why they are in place. The US has that lengthy form primarily because of terrorism. No one has been affected by terrorism as the US. So they have that. They want to know your social security and your social media accounts. They want to know everything. But there's no reason for Uganda to ask me about my WhatsApp account. Okay. The heightened level of terrorism that Uganda is protecting itself against is not equivalent, it cannot be equated to that of the US. Therefore, we should not do the same things. We should not even compare the same forms. If you don't need my WhatsApp account and the US does, we should grant them that. So you know what? Those guys need your security, your social media account, but we don't. Instead of copying these things, oh, the US is doing this, let's do it too. The US is doing this, let's do it. The UK is doing this, Canada is doing this, let's do it too. No, that's not how our leaders should be making these laws. That's not a good way to legislate. We should do things that affect the Ugandans and us in the diaspora, things that have the questions that you guys already asked. What is the impact? At the top of that, who is this law being written for? Who is it going to inconvenience? And what are the consequences? So I'll stop there. Go ahead, sir.
Very, 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 very interesting observations, Albert. And I entirely agree with you. Absolutely. I think I started off this conversation by saying that most of the things that are done, you know, our country is a country is a country that's full of contradictions. You know, we are at contradiction with everything we do. People say this and they mean the other. You know, if we only had straight faces, you know, to say what we say and we mean what we say, I think we would be so much in a better position. I think in that kind of environment, it also encourages, you know, the grassroots, the local people, you know, to have confidence in what their leaders are doing, because it's taken in the best interest of the country, in the best interest of everyone, other than you know, taking decisions in the short term that are really myopic, you know, and they are only meant to solve problems in the short term because you have a political problem here and you think the best way out of it is to legislate and put restrictions on other people or just make it hard, you know, for them to have a livelihood. I think that's not a solution for the long term, and I don't think it will serve us in a good purpose, because it will be just a matter of time before even those who are behind, you know, designing these sorts of you know, policies and laws, they will also find themselves in the firing spot, you know, before it's too late. I remember. You remember one of the most prominent prime ministers. I don't think it was. Well, I don't know whether it was one of the most prominent prime ministers we've ever had. But we had a very influential prime minister until very recently, who, when he was in parliament as leader of government, he was very central, you know, to the enactment of that public order management, you know, act, which became a very offensive act that has been applied, you know, for very, you know, insincere motives for political purposes, you know, far beyond what was the intention behind that act. It was only meant to empower the police to be able to manage public disorder, and it's now turned into a tool of political manipulation and political, you know, kind of tactical manipulations. But I remember that gentleman when he was in parliament, and members, people who saw. Who looked ahead and they saw that this law was not a good law, that it would cause problems for the country. he said he didn't really care because they had the numbers. But it was not too late before the same law that he had helped to enact, despite its ugliness, was used against him. And then I hope that at that point he began to see the wisdom of those who had been opposed, to that law when it was being passed. So there is consequences. There is certainly consequences. For the avoidance of doubt, I just want to be very clear. The issue of being an indigenous, citizen is without question. That's not given to me by anybody. It's not given to me by the government. It's not given to me. It's who I am. It's a question of my identity, really, And I think for me, I'm grateful for the fact that, even though in one respect, the Constitution takes away your citizenship by prohibiting you to hold dual citizenship or citizenship of another country, which you would have voluntarily acquired, out of your own volition. It puts a prohibition on that. But in the same strain, it goes back and gives you the opportunity to reclaim back that citizenship. Obviously, not at the same level as possibly what you would have had. And I think for me, the problem I sense there is that there is this creation of a two-tier citizenship, if you see what I mean. Then you find yourself in a situation where you have people who are, because they were citizens before and they had to lose their citizenships, and then because they have got to reapply again, and it puts us, or it puts those who are concerned at the mercy of the state. Because, whereas you cannot be stripped of your indigenous citizenship, you can be stripped of your citizenship by registration. The grounds are there, There is no such provision for stripping of citizenship, indigenous citizenship. Somebody cannot do that. But if you are a registered citizen, I think the grounds are very clear in the Constitution that you can be stripped of that citizenship if the grounds pertain. So there is a problem there. My worry is that I really don't want us to, and I would hate us to be in a situation where we have a two-tier kind of citizenship. One is higher and the other one is less. I would really be uncomfortable with that. And I think the key thing should be is that if you are a citizen, you are a citizen. You are entitled to vote, you are entitled to own property, you are entitled to do whatever you want to do as a citizen of a country. And I think for me that's really crucial. It's that one unique kind of area which I would like to be corrected. But certainly I do get the concern. I do get the concern because it doesn't sit well, really, I've been looking at my heritage here for obvious reasons, and I've been looking back through my great grandparents, Nkwanzi, Chironde, Matia Lukindu, so on and so forth. I've been going back the line and reciting them because of something that happened in the family. I just wanted to kind of refresh my understanding of our family lineage. What happens when something disastrous happens? Who do you go to? What are the cultural lines that you've got to pursue to be able to make sure that things are being done in the correct, in the correct approach? And I think that's where the idea of being an indigenous person comes from. I am Mitala because I am Mitala. That's not given. I don't owe that to anybody because I am who I am because I am who I am. And therefore, nobody, whether I hold a Ugandan passport, whether I hold whichever passport, nobody can wake up in the day and tell me that you are no longer a Mitala, you are so and so. I think that would be ridiculous and it's not desirable, really. So those concerns, I do get them. I think it's crucial that people in the diaspora should continue to speak with one voice through these kind of conversations, through the various strong lobby organizations that we have, whether in America, whether in Canada, whether in the UK, so that people in the diaspora can come up with one voice. I think we are a force to reckon with, and I think it's no longer possible for the government to ignore people in the diaspora. If there was such a time when they thought that people in the diaspora didn't matter, I don't think that is possible any longer, because of the sorts of knowledge, expertise, experience, and so many other domains in which people in the diaspora have become to be a central focus, if you're looking at the issues of national development. You know, I think what's really what is really unfortunate is that there seems to have been quite a lot of focus on enabling those who are at home, you know, to be able to participate in developmental programs that can encourage and drive economic progress for the country, which is all of us we are looking for. But it doesn't look to be that the same kind of focus has been applied to people in the diaspora. And this is one of those areas. We've already considered that, you know, a lot of money is sent back by Ugandans living abroad who contribute directly towards this program of poverty alleviation. I think the contribution of the diaspora people outstrips, you know, any kind of contribution that is made anywhere, whether in donations, whether in aid, or whether in government, you know, allocations. So I think a group of people who have got a potential of that kind, it's really impossible to ignore them any longer. And I think if we do all speak with one voice, it's quite possible that we can get our views and our sentiments properly, you know, articulated in this kind of policies and policy initiatives. I think that's what I would be saying on that, Henry.
Mr. Albert, any response to that? Can we proceed with other suggestions? There is a comment here on WhatsApp. On Facebook. Mr. Henry Riombia is saying that it is so surprising that the current government is proposing that one is no longer a citizen after choosing to live in another country. Collective advocacy, including those NRM or sympathizers, are needed. So this law is actually a decade old. We're only starting to talk about it now.
Yes. We're beginning to talk about it. We're beginning to talk about it, and especially I know you introduced me as the former deputy speaker of UNA, of the UNA Council, and Henry Riombia is now the deputy speaker of the UNA Council. So UNA, and I'm bringing in UNA for obvious reasons, because they in 2009 and between 2007 and 2009 or 2011 they were very active as a diaspora organization that advocated for dual citizenship. But around that same time, the organization also went through turmoil. I think they broke off apart in 2014, and then the fights have never stopped. The guns have never been put back in the holster. So in that period, the community, the people who spearheaded that dual citizenship advocacy, never went back or continued the pressure on the government when the government was writing implementation laws. So when this act is, you're right. I believe it's the Immigration Act of 2012. I think that's the official name for it. I could be wrong, but it's a decade old. So now is when some of these implementation guidelines are coming out. The law is in place, but as some of us who are familiar with how laws are made, the law really is very simple. It could even be a one-liner, but you have to go back and write statutes that are underneath it and implementation procedures that are under it. And that's, for the most part, if they're following the British and the American legal system, that's, for the most part, that is done by the executive. The law gives them that power to do that, and then they go ahead and do that. So some of the things, you have to do this, or you have to apply for a letter to come, or that kind of stuff, are not written in the Constitution. But they have an enabling law that allows them to do these restrictive things. So that's really what I can say about that. It's just that the law is a decade old. It's just that we're tuning in because the executive now is putting in place these restrictive measures, or at least the measures that we find restrictive, and we're all waking up saying, what? But yes, we were also the very people who asked for dual citizenship. Now, what form it came in is now the point of contention. I don't mind being a Ugandan citizen and an American citizen. But if being an American citizen means that Uganda strips me of my birthright, then we got a problem. And if it was okay to say it and in those 10 years, because we didn't know what that meant. So they had the law in the books, and like I said, we've been drinking from a fire hose in this government in Uganda that we don't even stop to think of that. What did the government say? What did the president say? I mean, and we can go on and on into other topics, and then look at what is happening. The president can actually wake up one day and say, schools are closed.
Until
January. I dare Biden to say that in the US.
I know.
I know. I dare Biden to do a press conference and say that in the US. We will riot. He has no right to say that. He has no right. But we are in a country that does that, where the president looks and says, schools are closed until
next
January.
year.
And January, and who knows how we arrived at January? He could actually say until 2026.
Exactly.
Huh?
Yeah.
So that's where we are. When you're being faced with those kinds of stuff, it's why 10 years later we're waking up to say, oh my God, this law is on the books and we think it's unconstitutional. But I have no doubt in my mind that this law is unconstitutional. We just have to fight it, but to fight it, now that they have even put out some measures that show that they're going to encroach on our rights as Ugandan-born citizens of whatever country, then we need that concerted effort, that organization, and UNA, and I'm speaking to Mr. Riombia. UNA can be part of this conversation. They were leaders in this conversation before. They can come, but we are no longer going to cede this space to organizations like UNA by themselves, because now we have seen that they can lead and then they can fall us apart, then they can go to sleep, and the consequences are going to affect us all. And to be fair, and I've been part of UNA in leadership for a couple of years, and then Henry Sari, you are part of it, and Henry Riombe is now part of it. We don't have our act together. Okay, we don't have the trust of the community. We also have our own issues to sort out. So this is too important to cede to an organization that does not have complete trust of the community.
Right.
Okay, that's where I'll end.
And I think we should also invite the cultural institutions to engage in these conversations, because
yes,
when they say that Mr. Bakasala can no longer own property in Toro, how does that sit with the Omukam of Toro? I'm not
quite sure. I know it's absurd, because until December of this year, I was the chairman of Toro American Association. So it's absurd. It's absurd also, like we were talking about.
I'm not sure.
His name is Kahaya. So,
I'm not sure whether I've seen right, and I beg to be corrected. I'll go back and check and see if I read correctly. But I think I've seen somewhere within our constitutional provision that says that if somebody who is a Ugandan citizen loses their citizenship due to taking up citizenship of another country, and they do not necessarily lose ownership of property they would have acquired while they were Ugandans. So say suppose today I'm a Ugandan and I acquire property, and then in 2 years' time I take citizenship of another country, I do not necessarily lose ownership of that property that I acquired before I became a citizen. So I think that is something that will need to be looked at,
but where is this enshrined? Did you read the Constitution?
Yeah, I read it in the Constitution. I've been reading. Before we came on air, I was looking at chapter 13. I think it's stipulated somewhere in chapter 13 No, chapter 3 rather, not chapter 13. There is a provision
It's
there.
it's chapter 3, but I didn't see that myself. I didn't see anything pertaining to property.
but then what happens if you want to sell that land or transfer it from yourself to Mr. Henderson?
You can't
there
is
do
something.
That because then you will need a national ID, but you can't have a national ID if you don't have dual citizenship. so
yeah, I think it's in article.
Yes, you can. I think your property. Yeah. No, I'm saying your property was not taken away in the Constitution.
No.
But in a way, it was taken away because
it wasn't spoken of. It wasn't spoken of.
You cannot sell it. Yeah, but the other laws have kind of speak for it. For example, you can't sell your land. You cannot give your land away because to do that you need a national ID.
Even to own land now.
The Land Act is very clear on that. That no Ugandan can at least not. You can have a lease and so many other things around that, but not. You can't own land. You can't hold freehold. You can't have freehold land. But I see the concerns of all of us. It affects all of us. If I gave my children property today, possibly they would not be able to take ownership of that property because technically they are not Ugandans by virtue of the fact that they hold citizenship of another country, which I think is absurd.
They are Ugandans. They are Ugandans based on you and your dad. That's what the Constitution says. Tata wo oba jjajjaawo bw'abanga yali muna Uganda nga yabeerayo emyaka 10 from 1926. I think that came in.
That's what the Constitution says. But then it goes on further. But then it goes on down further to say that there is a prohibition on you holding dual citizenship. So which means that if my children take citizenship of another country, unless they register to restore their citizenship, unless they register to restore their Ugandan citizenship, they are not Ugandans.
But here's the thing. This is another conversation that we need to have. My kids did not make that decision for me to come here and pay swear allegiance to the Queen to become a Canadian citizen. I did it for myself. Never nabana benzadde because nze nali muna Uganda ne jjajjaabwe muna Uganda. But balina okubeera Ugandan citizens by default, so they should be dual citizens by default. First, they are citizens, Canadian citizens by birth, but they are also Ugandan citizens by association through me and their granddad or grandparents. That is what Ugandans need to discuss now. They need to discuss these things. Those kids should have access to that property without any kind of encroachment by government. Citizenship by registration, because when you ask for citizenship by registration, you are forfeiting your citizenship by birth.
Definitely.
Or by association through your grandparent or your
and that is where the key contention is. That does it look fair? Is it reasonable? Is it right that I should lose my birthright because there is a piece of law somewhere that says that if you take citizenship of another country, you are no longer citizens of this country. I think that doesn't sit right, and I agree with you entirely. That just doesn't sit right.
It's complicated. It's a complicated conversation. We shall continue engaging in this conversation. Hopefully, I can get someone from Uganda now who either sits in the legislative chambers or someone who is a constitutional lawyer to continue expounding on these conversations. This is an important conversation that we need to continue having. I am going to ask you for your closing remarks. I think it's been 2 hours now. It feels like it has been only 30 minutes for me. Naye, what are your closing remarks? I'm going to start with Mr. Mitala. Your closing remarks as we conclude this conversation.
Closing remarks, guys. I wish you a lovely week ahead. Me, I always want to be, even in my most sad moments, I always keep a smile on my face. When I sit here, somebody might not know, except if I've said it, somebody may not know that my sister died 2 days ago. So let's keep positive. There's nothing of this kind that is not correctable. I think there's a time when we were talking here about the great 1900 Uganda agreement, which was showing us how this now contentious issue of the Uganda Maryland came to be, and how the concept of the Bataka and the Bakungu and so on, how they came to own land, and other people's rights being taken over by another group of people. I think one of the things that I remember coming from that conversation is that the Uganda refused to let go of that concept that defines them as Uganda. So, and despite whatever measures that have been employed for the subsequent years, so many efforts have been taken to try to dismantle people's spirit about their
Attachment.
their identity of who they are as a people. So this again is one of those questions. The question of identity goes really to the core of your existence as a human being. When you sleep, you know who you are. When you wake up, you know who you are. It's a question of identity. Nobody can take that away from you. But of course, there needs to be effort. There needs to be effort for everybody who is concerned with this issue. If there is an unfairness, if there is an injustice, it's just right that that injustice should be collectively fought and corrected using all the legal means available. That will be my word for the day. Thank you very much, guys. Again, I call upon Ugandans in Canada. Please come to the rescue of my two nieces and see how you can help. They are motherless. There is no other family connection down there. The mother has been a very reclusive kind of person. She wasn't a very common person. She didn't associate with lots of people. I doubt she had lots of friends in that environment, but there is two young children there who need guidance, and you people who are down there should show your kindness and see how this matter can be resolved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali, and I know Mr. Liobia connected with me regarding this issue. We have also connected with Carol, who is Bakasara's niece, actually. So she's also she's working hard to ensure that those kids get connected to the community in Abbotsford. We shall do whatever we can in our power okulaba nti abaana abo tebabeera isolated. I know their mom was an introvert, but that happens sometimes in our communities, especially when you're trying to figure out how to manage your life, your new life in a new country. So it is complicated, but tujja kukola kyonna ekisoboka okulaba nti no tulaba abaana abo nti bali well taken care of. We grieve with you during this difficult time. We are going to try and connect with different community leaders and see what we can do really under these circumstances. On that note, I want to invite Mr. Bakasara to give us his final remarks regarding this issue of dual citizenship, duality of citizenship. Mr. Bakasara, your final remarks. You're frozen, I think. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Mr. Bakasara is frozen for some reason, but I'm pretty sure he's going to come back and give us his final remarks regarding this issue. Hopefully he has realized that he is freezing. So he will be joining us. Once he joins us, he rejoins, he will give us his final remarks. But I want to thank Gwena atugoberera webale nnyo webale ddala tugoberera sharing emboozi eno sharing wonna wooli oba oli ku YouTube oba oli ku Facebook sharing emboozi eno kubanga emboozi eno nkulu bye twogerako newankubadde nga tubyogedde nnyo mu lunyaanyembe bye twogerako bintu by'olina okumanya okulaba nti nno otegeera kiki ekigenda mu maaso ate okubirize n'abantu okubeera nti bakyogerako bw'obeera nga oli munnayuganda nga wazaalibwa Uganda tulina okufuna exemptions on how we reconnect with our country. We should be able to get visas on arrival. I think that's very important for the people who are carrying foreign passports. We should be able to get visas on arrival, and we should be given automatic residence certificates. Tubeere nga tetulina kukola ki registering going through registration nti ate leta kano leta kali leta kano basaba ne application gye najjuzaamu nga nsaba citizenship ya Canada nti nayo gituwe kati application gye najjuzaamu nga nsaba citizenship ya Canada mujagaza ki mujagaza ki ddala ddala
the state wants to know so much about you. That's
application gye nasaamu nga nsaba citizenship ya Canada that's a property of the government of Canada that I shouldn't be sharing with the government of Uganda.
Data protection, there is data protection.
Data protection. The application, it's a property of the government of Canada. Bw'omungamba nti nkibawola okubanga mwagala registering to become a dual citizen. That nonsense is not going to work with some of us. You need to revisit your law. Ate temugenda kutwala properties zange olw'okubanga mulowooza nti nno kakati engeri gyenti eyo that's not going to happen.
I think in those there will be a revision of this. Because the issue impact assessment, you really need to assess, what is the impact. Because obviously this is going to have a very severe impact. If it is not already having a severe impact.
It is already having a severe impact in that Gambia nina mikwano gyange wano bafiiriddwa gundi mukwano gwange yagenda nafiirwa kitaawe balina omuziika bamu expecting okubeerayo kubanga ye muvubuka omukulu mu luggya naye nga alina okusooka nakubeera brother Ensima muweereza invitation letter. What nonsense is that? Ogenda okuzika taata nti ate sooka ompeereza invitation letter genda wapplyinge online biki osasule visa olyoka ojje. Abamu babagaana batuuka ku airport ku Pearson airport ne babagaana n'okuboardinga gundi nga baguze the tickets.
I've heard about it.
If you have a ticket that is not insured, oba ogenda kufiirwa sente.
I've heard about it. Yeah, I think it's unnecessary. Really,
it is nonsensical.
It needs to be revisited, and that's why applying these sorts of pressure and engaging this kind of conversations maybe raises the issue again back to the forefront, so that that injustice needs to be corrected. I'm confident. I'm pretty confident that there will be progress that will be made on that specific issue.
Yeah, indigenous Ugandans should not be treated like other foreigners who do not have any attachment to the country. We need to revisit this law as it pertains to how it affects indigenous Ugandans. Omusajja omutoolo akulidde mu Tooro, omusajja omunyola akulidde Hoima, omusajja omusoga akulidde Jinja oba Iganga, omusajja omunyankole akulidde Embarara oba wherever. Ekitegeera omusajja omukyoli akulidde yonna gye bazaaliddwa ne bakulirayo. They shouldn't be treated ng'Omukanada yazaalibwa wano ayagala okugenda e Uganda obanga omuntu applying for registration now becoming a naturalized Ugandan nga Tom Clark. I think is it Tom Clark?
Yeah, that doctor. Yeah.
ekitegera muna Uganda afuuse naturalized azeyombuka kati nze nzijuzeemu gundi yeemu ng'eya Tom Clark. Nze yazaalibwa Uganda alina bajjajja bange abeebase Buganda mu Kyaddondo. Baganda bange nti ate nange nzijuzeemu foomu yeemu. Ebintu bino we have to revisit these things. The notion of copy and paste is counterproductive. We have thrived in these countries because we are law-abiding citizens, but we are also thriving because we question these laws so that the bazituna bagamba but why laws are ligenda okukola kireka siwe because right now tukyalina abantu abagamba nti nze sigenda kufuna immunization. We are still persuading them. Mkitegeera. We're still persuading bane mufune vaccination singa twali twagala kubatta tetwantandise n'abasawo. Yo twatandika n'abasawo baggwango bakuba vaccination. Kati tuyinza kubanga twagala obatta ate netutandikira ku basawo ababajjanjaba. But these conversations are still continuing.
They are indeed. It's never ending. You know,
it's never ending.
It's never ending. These things are so mind-blogging and they are so intriguing that you cannot have all the answers just in one go. Those ekisinga obukulu is, you know, eranga Albert bwagambye amateeka mangi agayita nga abantu beebase nga tebategedde impact yago kiki kitegeeza ekyo kiva maybe it's a show of disinterest. Luckily I think lots of people in the diaspora they are starting to be more actively interested and engaged moving twayifaanako bwebiti naye sometimes ebintu bino bijja ne happening because of that kind of disengagement and the disinterest in when these processes are initiated. Kubanga singa wabeerawo era nga bwe nagambye that loud clear voice that says that no nga naffe abantu abali wano this is what we feel should be happening in this direction, oba oliawo twandibadde tufuna outcomes eziri different. But I think the discussions need to continue. I think these matters need to be looked at a little bit more critically, more so with the objective of revising the law if the law is indeed unfair and unjust in the way it's been drafted and even applied. Then certainly I am of the view that, you know, we need to have a law review, and as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Muganda Wange. I'm going to let you go. Mr. Bakasara may not be able to come back, but as we go, I want you guys to think about this.
Walanga nepe oyi bageze mu maaso omukulu n'omuto abakyala n'abaami tewali kulera ngalo ssebo bonna bakeera kukazana ogenda waffe Kampala ogenda mu kibuga Kampala ndabire bolabakeyo otuuse Kampala nemubakulu oyitangayo gwe iwamuzeeyo oyitangayo iwababo otuukangayoko mugambe baba abaana bamutumidde sinkusindozo mubuzangako ab'eggomba ne Butambala Malay njagala kudda ku butaka tuwayenga n'abandi bennaleka abandi saabasiibula nga zitwala Kampala yeekolera omwana w'ekibuga Kampala yeesanyusa okwo kwambala Kampala nga mwambazi buli musono omupya
This is the state of the nation. Ibifa Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Salu.